Elaine was CFO of Lyft from about January 22 to May 23. Then before that, she was CFO for Amazon Studios, did that for a couple of years. And then before that, she was CFO of Hulu, the streaming service, for a couple of years. But before all of that, she spent 22 years at Disney in strategic development and mergers and acquisitions. So she's had a really diverse career. And we'll talk about how that career has evolved and transitioned today. But here's the most important thing to know about Elaine. She has a son. He's here today. He's like, oh God, I didn't know you were gonna do this to me. But she has a son who is a Neely student, which is how I first had the opportunity to meet Elaine. We've had a handful of chances to interact with one another since then, and I can just tell you she's an amazing person, and I think you are really gonna enjoy this conversation today. So please join me as I welcome to the stage Elaine Paul. That's quite a resume you got there. To say the least, I think. So would you mind sharing a brief overview of your professional journey? And so with the exception of having left a company after 20 years of service, looking back, I mean, so obviously that was a big deal, but what were some of the other career-defining decisions that you made?
Yes, well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here, so thank you, TCU, thank you, sponsors. And I'll just share before I get into that, I've just been so impressed with TCU and Neely from minute one, when we were so fortunate that our son was accepted. And then as we've gotten to see the program, and my husband is a CFO too, so we're the double CFO family, and seeing how Neely is preparing the students and the practical tie-in to the business world, we've just been very impressed. So it's a real honor to be here today.
Well, thank you. That's so good to hear.
My trajectory. So I studied economics in college and in the dinosaur era, and was interested in getting a best-in-class analyst job. And that meant, at that time in the late 80s, investment banking or consulting, which was what I was going to go do. And lo and behold, someone that was 1 year ahead of me at college that I really respected and thought, this guy's for sure going to Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or whatever, went to the Walt Disney Company in this new group that had been formed under Michael Eisner's leadership back in the day, called Corporate Strategy and Development, which in the late 80s in entertainment was unusual to start bringing business and MBA. I wasn't an MBA, but they were hiring analysts and MBAs, a very small group, to start adding, quote unquote, more business acumen and analytical tools to decision making in entertainment, which was a bit unusual at the time. The guy leading the group had been at Bain Consulting, and it was pitched to me as it's a perfect marriage of investment banking and consulting in the context of the Walt Disney Company. And then they sent me a 4-foot Mickey Mouse and a bottle of champagne, and what 22-year-old says no to that? So that was the start of my career at Disney, which I thought would be, a fun start. Well, that was a fun start to 22 years. And I did do 3 years as an analyst, and then I went to get an MBA, and thought, okay, we're spreading our wings, we're going, I won't come back. But as I matured when I was pursuing my MBA, I realized I really want to be in an industry where I understand and touch and enjoy the product. And I really thought I wanted to do strategic planning. So I could either do that at a consulting firm, or I could do that at in industry. And Disney was one of the top 5 companies in terms of probably best strategic planning groups in the United States. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'll just go back to Disney. And then that became, I used to call it, I was a career monogamist, because I was there for 22 years and went all the way from analyst to right out of MBA, and kept ticking along to ultimately I was senior vice president, and I was the number 2 in the group. And it was an extraordinary period of growth for media and entertainment, an extraordinary period of global expansion, which was a really special experience in my career, to have the opportunity to build Disney's digital and media businesses, not only domestically but globally, and a huge time of transformation as traditional media businesses started getting disrupted by technology. And so there was the classic dilemma of how much do you protect the business you have versus how much do you go after the new opportunity. And so it was a continual, you referred earlier to education and lifelong learning. It was a continual, okay, what's the next thing? And technology was always at the forefront of technology is disrupting what we have and it's presenting opportunities. Bob Iger, who had become the CEO, was really embracing that. He was very close with Steve Jobs. He was a real visionary in terms of let's embrace the future. And I had the opportunity to sort of work in that environment, which was a real luxury. You asked, okay, what was the career path? One of the things that I had done in 2009, Disney invested in Hulu, and I had led that investment from the corporate strategy perspective, and we took a minority stake in the streaming service Hulu. And all of our executives at ABC said, this will never amount to anything. They will never make those numbers on that advertising deal. And it's all about ABC. We're going to have the ABC app, and that's going to be the future. But corporately, we saw some opportunity in an aggregated service and really embracing technology, giving the consumers anything they want, anytime, any place, anyhow. And so corporately, we said we got to have a toe in that water. And then for the next 4 years, I worked from we are minority interest strategic owners of Hulu. We had a private equity partner that wanted an exit. And so we went through a lot of interesting iterations of writing an S1 and potentially taking the company public. And then one of the strategic investors were the media companies got cold feet. Then we went on a sales process, made the book twice. Then another investor got cold feet. And then the media companies over time, Disney and Fox, and I was on the Disney side, we wrote a business plan. What if we invested big to grow big? What if we put our foot off the brake and onto the gas? And let's buy the company, let's get the private equity guys out, and let's invest to go big. And we did that. The private equity company had a nice exit, the management team had an exit, and it was time to go, and we needed a new management team. And I put my name in the hat for CFO, and that was my transition from going from a corporate staff job where I would manage sort of SWAT teams of 10 people to boom, I'm the CFO at, I used to call it the white hot center of where technology and media meet. And that was just a dramatic change from SVP at Disney to being the second oldest person at a Silicon Beach pseudo startup, where I was given, I'll tell a little story. Literally the transition happened like in the morning I was at Disney, in the late morning we were in the conference room, and the head of strategy and development told the team that I was going to be leaving, taking this role. I drove across town to Hulu. I was in the elevator. I got out. They met me with a hoodie, and I was going to go meet the team, and this was a surprise announcement that I was coming as CFO. So they handed me a hoodie. They said, it's all open offices, stand up, sit down desks, no offices for anyone. The CEO is right there at the stand up, sit down desk. I'm right there at the stand up, sit down desk. They handed me the hoodie and they said, you can go into this room. It was like a little conference room enclosed in glass, and get into your headspace, and then we'll be back. And I sat down with this hoodie, and I had to Google what is a headspace. And I was like, okay, here we go. Evolve or die, evolve or die. And I went out, and there we were, 700 engineers in their hoodies, scooters zipping across the floor, kegs of beer 24/7. That's since been changed. But it was just a whole radical departure, and that was the beginning of sort of the next phase of my career.
So I have to ask, like, when you put the hood on, is that how you find your headspace?
You know what? I had to draw the line, and I had to say a middle-aged woman, the second oldest person at this company, can't rock a hoodie. But okay, I'll go for jeans and a blazer, but I got to look responsible. I'm in charge of the money.
So in all seriousness, there's a few things I really love about that answer for our students. Right, it's fascinating the way your career has touched on almost every aspect of business, right? There's the accounting, there's the finance, there's the strategic management, there's the technology and innovation side. Like it's pretty much all there. And right, entrepreneurship to some extent too, because you have that corporate entrepreneurship that was going on with Disney and Hulu. So
100%. And one of the first things I did when I joined Hulu, and Hulu had been managed very tightly in terms of on a bit of a shoestring, because the media companies were like, should we really let it go? Should we let it go? So to the previous CFO's credit, he was working with very limited resources. But I came in and we had a bigger business plan to invest. One of the places I had to invest right away was in the finance group, because it had been under-resourced, really, with very junior accounting and FP&A talent. There was not one graduate degree. And I knew that to make the kind of decisions and be the sort of finance function that I wanted to build, which was going to be strategic, front of table partner to the business leads, to the CEO, to the board, that we needed to invest in change management and different capabilities. So I started recruiting differently, hiring MBAs. Soon I realized we needed some more specialized groups. So we built a small, lean, mean sort of corporate development, corporate strategy group. And then being in a technology business with direct to consumer, we had a lot of data. And what I realized, and how I came to realize it, what I realized was there was this unbelievable data that could be mined to inform and supercharge our business decisions, but we weren't doing it yet. We weren't marrying finance with that availability of data. The other thing I realized is it was going to take a different skill set. It was not your MBA that was going to be able to do that. It was not your undergrad finance or accounting major. We needed to have folks that could analyze the data and do sort of advanced analytics. And my aha moment was we were whiteboarding late at night trying to figure something out for some big decision, and my lead person was gone or sick, my next person was gone or sick, and this relatively junior manager came in and started whiteboarding with me. Turns out she's like a beyond math genius, and she starts sharing with me some information she knew from our marketing data. And I said, oh my God, we've been looking at this, the customer lifetime data, where did you get this? She said, well, I have this like best friend in data science who I asked them to run this query. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I talked to our CTO and I said, you know what, we've messed up. You have this data science group that is working on stuff deep in the bowels of the organization, but not with the context of what's gonna add the most value to our business decision making. And I have these business analyst types who have that context but don't have the data or the tools. And so as a result, the CTO and I created a new position, a vice president position that reported to both of us, that ran data science and advanced analytics. And we started marrying that, and that supercharged our understanding of customer lifetime value, our ability to make really well-informed decisions about marketing investment, our ability to make really well-informed decisions about content investment, what marginal investments were going to increase either the length of stay of our subscribers, our ability to make more advertising revenue, but it was all unleashed through the power of this, the data and analytics through the business lens and out of the pure tech group. And that was a real aha moment for me and for Hulu and our ability to make good decisions.
That's amazing. That's such a great story. You've talked about this a little bit, but let's do a history lesson. So the CFO role has its roots in the early 1900s when businesses first began to recognize the importance of financial management. But back then it was considered mostly just a support role. And people didn't really think of it as strategic. So as business became more modern and complex and globalized and all the things that we've talked about, those needs changed. So set the table for what you're going to share through the rest of our conversation today about how the modern CFO role must deliver cross-functional insights. And like I said, you hit on that a little bit, but maybe just tie it up in a bow for us.
Yeah, I think, what I see in the marketplace is, and the term is used quite frequently now, is strategic CFO. We're looking for there's strategic CFO. What does that mean? And of course, having extreme financial discipline, having a great controller, a rigorous accounting, that's table stakes. And then the strategic on top of it, increasingly, And I love seeing these programs at Neely. I love that you have this master's and Renee. Looking for Renee.
Analytics.
Yeah, the business analytics and the master's program, the one-year master's in that is fantastic because there is now so much data and quantitative opportunity to help inform the business decisions. And then the CFO can really be a partner at the table to the CEO, to the head of marketing, to the head of revenue, in looking through the financial lens to help make those decisions really clearly. So I think that there's a big shift, not only in the CFO role, in the chief marketing officer role as well. There cannot be a chief marketing officer, or the new evolved chief marketing officer, I think, has to be highly quantitative and highly analytical, or have a right hand who is, because it's just so critically important in today's world where we now have all this data and we can mine it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like probably in almost every industry, every business, everything has become strategic, right? There's no role that can't be strategic, especially as you move up in the organization. And analytics has to be a part of it. And in Neely even, right? I put the word as strategic in almost every sentence I say, I feel like. And people will probably get tired of it, but it's so important that we run, right? We run the business school strategically because that's what we're teaching, but also because that's what's going to make us, right, be able to outpace our competition. So how did your role and responsibilities as a CFO compare between Lyft, Amazon Studios, and Hulu? So you can tell us about what were the similarities and differences based on the different industries, customer bases and state of technology during your tenure at those places, and especially since that's evolved so much in recent years.
Yeah, I think the most obvious difference is Lyft as a public company. And that was something I really wanted the opportunity in my career. I was quite happy at Amazon. Amazon's a fascinating company. But the next career move I was really looking for was the opportunity to take a company public or to be a public company CFO. And then beware what you ask for, because it was challenging. That was called 6 quarters, 6 dog years, and building scar tissue was my Lyft experience. But public company CFO, the street management piece, the setting, targets, beating or exceeding what you guide the street to, managing investors, and in our case, unfortunately, it was angry investors because of the market dynamics and our particular sector dynamics and then our own performance. So that was, and then being, of course, all the regulatory issues and SEC and accounting issues. And so that was a whole, step change joining Lyft. In Amazon division CFO, that was very interesting because I'm part of the fleet of ocean liners that is the company Amazon, but best in class finance. And what was amazing about Amazon in terms of data and analytics is origins as a tech company, and 100% a tech company, and 100% focused on data and analytics decision making through the entire through line of the company. There's a very quirky Amazon practice that's demanded. Really, it's not a practice. That came from Jeff Bezos, where you start every meeting where there's going to be a decision made with a 6-page memo. And it's very formulaic. It has to be 6 pages. It has to have 2 pages of FAQs. And it's meant to be, here's the decision that I, Elaine Paul, am putting forth. Here's all the data and analysis around why I'm recommending this. Now let me do FAQs as to why you may, I know that you probably think it's a bad decision, so I'm going to take my best stab at why it's good and my anticipated counterarguments. You sit at a table at the beginning of a 1-hour meeting. It's all very formulaic. 20 minutes to read this 6-page memo for everyone, which is very awkward. People don't even say hello. They're kind of robotic. Okay, you sit around the table, read your memo, and then you debate and discuss. You decide, you come to a decision, and then there's 9, I think, Amazon leadership principles, one of which is disagree and commit. So we'll have our debate, majority or the boss wins, and now we disagree and commit, and then we're done. We're efficient. We did this memo, we read it, we made the decision, and now we're done. And we did it based on data and analytics. And I really loved that coming from media that was going into tech to going tech that has some media. I love this data and analytics framework because In media, sometimes people can get away with, it's in my gut. I feel it. It's going to be big. It's going to be very big. And as a CFO, I was always like, I want to see a little bit of analysis that says this is going to be big. And then Amazon really valued that.
Yeah.
And then Hulu was just a really exciting growth experience. We grew I was there 6 years, and we grew the company from $1 billion top line to about 5.5. At the time, top line and subscribers were the metrics, profits, cash flow. That was a different story back then. Now, of course, streaming services are under a lot of pressure. But we grew subscribers from 10 million to 28. And it was just vibrant and fun and exciting. And as I said earlier, it was the white hot center of tech and media. So it was just so fun to be sitting at a relatively small to medium-sized boat navigating that kind of growth during that time in the industry.
I will say, just as an aside, I have found that students love to do projects on Hulu.
Oh, fun. Well, there's a Harvard Business School business case that was written for the CFO class at Harvard where I'm the protagonist.
Oh.
So,
ooh.
Go
Okay,
look
we're going to have to go look that
David.
up and find that. Okay.
Fritz Foley, the professor.
Okay, so Lyft co-founder and CEO Logan Green said that you've made a career of thinking differently in established markets. I think that is a wonderful thing for someone to say about you. So what do you think he meant by that, and how did you learn to think differently? And can you give us some examples?
I think coming back to the Hulu experience, and from a personal perspective, this is not what Logan was speaking about then, but evolve or die. It was about, and you talked about lifelong learning, and for the students and for all the folks out here from industry, I think we all know lifelong learning now is so important, and things are changing so fast. I was speaking earlier this morning to someone, and AI, like if we think about AI, and it's in the paper every single day, the digital paper, that was not a term, ChatGPT, we didn't have that in our lexicon 19 months ago.
Yeah.
And now it is a mega threat and a mega opportunity. So executives, students, we have to be prepared for lifelong learning at a really fast pace of change. And it's like the technology curves. It's just getting faster and faster. So now I forget the origins of your question. So
what he meant by that, and how you learned to think differently, and give us some examples.
Yeah, I think so. I think having been in strategy at Disney, where we were looking for where's the next growth opportunity, and realizing, okay, we're in these established markets, but how are those going to change? And where are we going to invest? And then how willing are we going to be to let this business slowly, we're going to pull back on it, or maybe fast, while we really go forward over here. And that was very true if you just think about Hulu and going direct to consumer and streaming and making our content available that way. There was a line from our Hulu boardroom that has always stuck with me. Hulu originally was last night's TV. So it was network TV that had aired on the network the night before, and then it was available to stream on Hulu the next day. And that's, our board was made up of the top executives of those networks, the people that ran ABC and Fox, et cetera. And at Hulu, the Hulu management team, we wanted to, at the time we only had an ad-supported, it was like a $9 subscription plus ads. That's what we had. Our competitor was Netflix, no ads whatsoever. And that was a real barrier that was keeping our market, it was constraining our market size, honestly, because Netflix was the first mover. Netflix, people had learned to binge TV without advertising, and advertising was a barrier to those customers. So the CEO and I went and pitched to our board at Hulu, we want to create a different tier that will be priced much higher, but no ads. They practically had a heart attack. No ads, it's network TV. Like, ads is our lifeblood. Absolutely not. And then one of the board members you saw this kind of light bulb go off, and then he goes, we don't care about advertising. We care about revenue. So tell us about the pie. And it was like, okay, here's how our pie is going to grow. And fortunately, I had lived on the other side of the wall, so I had some idea of your pie is going to shrink, But and do your own math. I think it'll shrink about this much. Have your teams do your own math. But overall, we're going to create more value here. And that was absolutely the case. And then interestingly enough, now in that industry, you see Netflix going the other way, which is they were the high price, no ads premium. And now to expand their market, they've created the lower priced ad supported. So all things come around.
That is a great story. I love that. So how can individuals who are years into their career choice, perhaps as a CFO or a member of a management team, ensure they are as flexible in their skill set as possible? And how can companies who want to retain good employees help their employees gain these skills?
Well, we've talked a lot about pace of change and new things that are becoming extremely relevant. And you alluded to some of them earlier today, but if we think about cybersecurity and AI and advanced data analytics and all these things that need to be a part of our lexicon and part of our skill set, not any individual can control all of that, but you can have your eyes and ears open with a continual learning mindset and never think you know everything. Like my big aha moment was sitting with that manager under the manager under the manager and saying, oh my God, you figured out what, right? So you can learn from all levels of the organization and know your blind spots and figure out, like when I set up that advanced analytics and data science group, I knew that my skill set wouldn't be able to do that. I knew that my bright and shiny MBAs might not be able to do it, but we could hire folks that could. And so being able to hire well and build around your levels of expertise and then have a continual learning mindset. When I was at Lyft, very much a technology company, real-time marketplace where you're matching driver supply and customers who want rides, I would sometimes hear terms, and it was right in the heart of Silicon Valley. I was commuting up to San Francisco. I would sometimes hear terms with which I was not familiar, and I was like, okay, I've now heard the CEO say that twice. I'm going to go learn about that. And there's so many resources now, starting with Google, right? And then you figure out, oh, there's continuing education. So I'm going to, like, for example, one was just machine learning. I'm like, there's more I need to know about machine learning. So I think this continual learning mindset that you stressed, that you're imbuing in your students here is super important given the pace of change today.
I love what you said there too, is that you don't have to know everything, right? But you need to know enough, and then you hire people around you that fill in the gaps.
And ask questions.
Yeah.
And go to experts, right? Like we look in this room, you have a room full of experts here at TCU. Go to your experts, call the academicians, call your accounting firms and their special practice groups. I think that's the other thing, is being really willing and eager and opportunistic about, okay, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to learn that. My team needs to know about that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have so-and-so from our best-in-class outside accountants come talk to us about this new issue, and I'm going to have my team there.
Yeah, yeah.
And workers love that.
Yes, they do.
You know what? Yeah. We're all knowledge units. And if you're a knowledge unit, you want to increase your own value, right? And so you can invest in your own learning, and employees love to be invested in and continue growing their knowledge unit worth.
Absolutely, yeah. In your opinion, how much has the landscape for women in finance leadership evolved over the past 3 decades? So in one interview, you were quoted as saying, the keys for a working mother, and I think she is dead on here, the keys for a working mother are a good boss, a good partner, and good childcare.
100%. And I think things have changed radically, thank God, now. But here's my product number 1, child number 1, and I have 2 others. Will's my oldest. But and I just think the landscape for women in business has changed so much. Example, when I entered the workforce in 1989, and this seems so, so crazy now, but there were 3 analysts hired that year, 2 women and 1 man. And our mentor / director in this corporate strategy group sat us down And he looked at the man who was my classmate from college, and he goes, Mike, I know how you guys love to model and work with a thing. We're looking at an acquisition of Jim Henson's Muppet Company, and Jim Henson's The Muppets, and I want you to build this model, and I want the model to be able to do X, Y, Z, and like go at it. Go get him, guy. Then he looks at this woman who was from a Harvard undergrad, and he looks at me, and he looks at the two of us, and he says, ladies, I know how you ladies like to shop. And I know how you love it when it's on someone else's credit card. And he pulled out his Platinum Disney American Express and said, we need some merchandise for the board meeting to show what the Muppets is all about. Go buy a bunch of Muppet stuff. And the woman and I were like, oh my God. That woman ended up going to Harvard Business School, getting a handwritten note from one of the finance professors saying, your exam is one of the finest exams I have read in the history of Harvard Business School. She ended up being a very successful executive in private equity at Bain Capital, and then their debt arm, and now is a professor at Harvard. And I look back at the girls, I know how you ladies like to shop. So that was 1989.
Yeah.
When I started building a family, all of my colleagues were men with stay-at-home wives, a very different setup and framework. And I hid that pregnancy, would not talk about it because I felt it would be career limiting. When it was no longer hideable, I remember we were working on an M&A deal, and an old school M&A tax guy, I'm sitting there, pregnant, I think, with this guy right here. And the old school tax guy goes, well, I guess we need to get someone else on this deal because we know you're never going to come back. And I said, oh, hell yeah, I'm coming back. But
you're not getting rid of me that easy.
Yeah, but I had to navigate it. And you talked about a career ladder. I had 3 children in 5 years, and I just said to myself, look, I just got to stay in the game. I was a senior vice president, but I knew that it was going to be a little different when my children were very young. And thank God I had been at a company for a long time back then, because I had the credibility that I could make this ask. Now I think the rules have changed, but I made an ask that was, can I get a little flexibility? I will take a reduction in my pay. I need a little more time, because I wanted some time with my small children who weren't yet in full-time school. And thank God that worked, but that was a big ask. And I think it only worked because I had the credibility and because I had been there for a long time. And I was the first female senior vice president in that group. And what were they going to do with me, So, and I also worked kind of double to make it work. I would lean over backwards to make sure I was there for the right meetings and this and that. But then the kids, when they were all in full-time school, I was like, okay. One morning I woke up and I said, what is that? What is that smell? And I was like, it's ambition. It's back. I want my boss's job. And I was sure how the cards would unfold at Disney. So-and-so was going to be CEO. So-and-so was going to become CFO, and I could have my boss's job. So I told my boss this, and I said, I need a lunch. And I was like, I'm back. Like, I really would like to be in line to have your job when X, Y, and Z happens. He's like, you're the lead internal candidate. But you know what this means? And I said, I know. I need to go back full-time, full steam. And I said, let's just talk about when. And I was ready. Like, for that laddering approach, it was like, okay, boom, up, boom, just stay in the game, stay in the game. Now I'm ready to go explore new things. And I think the rules have really changed, but I was thrilled when I was in the position, and really the first time I was in this position was at CFO at Hulu. And I think I mentioned, my team was very young when I first came, not one graduate degree, not one married person. And then over the course of the 6 years, when I hired differently too, they grew up. I was so thrilled when actually my controller was a female and her number 2 was a female, and she got married, got pregnant, and she was terrified of, am I going to be able to keep it up? And I sat down with her and I said, of course, I'm going to be flexible. You're going to be flexible, but you have to still deliver. And we're going to make this work. And then that was one in a succession of many women that I've had the opportunity to be on my team. At Lyft, my leadership team, my treasurer was a very seasoned female treasury executive. My head of IR was a female. And my and my chief accounting officer was a female, all of whom had families and children. And I think it helped that I understood the perspective of you have to make it all work.
Yeah.
So I think it's different now, but it's really important that we're grooming these female, all leaders, but female leaders, and understanding their distinct needs at distinct levels, at distinct stages of life.
I think that's so true. And it's the other thing, though, that I think is really nice about it is that, right, it's allowed men to feel like they can be on different ladders and different paths as well, too, right? They don't have to go in, work hard, never know their kids, and retire, at 65 or whatever. They've got options, too.
100%. And look, it's a unit. The family's a unit, and sometimes it could be the man, it could be the female who's the primary earner. And so these days, making it work as a family unit, and employers understanding that and understanding, as you said, it could be about the men, it could be about the women.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what can good bosses in particular, you touched on this a little bit, but what can good bosses in particular do to support their strong female leaders?
I think flexibility, being a little more flexible in one's thinking, policy, a reasonable maternity leave policy, maybe a flexible, if that can work for that person's responsibility, and just thinking broadly about the ability for people to ladder their careers a bit. Is there a possibility for job sharing? Being creative in thinking about that, because you don't want to lose them. And when I was an MBA, I graduated in '94. My class was 25%, and I think you said Neely is about 45%.
Yeah, it's about, yeah.
So getting close to 50% women. We don't want to lose half the talent, right? And half the talent is likely to go through a childbearing phase where there's different needs for a period of time. And then there's a whole long runway out there. And so we as employers and as executives and as managers and as leaders need to make sure that we're creating environments and opportunities to build lifelong careers for all the talent, including the half that may have, bear children.
So what I'm hearing is, I feel like a theme of a lot of what you've said, and honestly a theme of these test speaker series just in general, is right, you can look at something as a constraint, but it's also an incredible opportunity, and it's what you make of it. And exactly, right, there's 50% of the talent out there that right, we could be missing out on, and thank goodness we're not. How can universities and businesses collaborate to bridge the gender gap in finance and leadership roles?
Number one, 50%. Let's get the ratio up to 50%. So it starts with the education, and starts with the students coming into undergraduate business fields and then going for graduate degrees. So I guess if you back it all the way up, it goes to girls in high school, and I'm on the board of a girls' school in Los Angeles where both of my daughters go, or one has gone and one is going, and like empowering females to think like a business career is a totally viable path. I think we're getting there because of the ratios. So we have 50% MBAs, and then are we recruiting that talent? Yes. There's probably 50-50 at the entry-level positions. Are we maintaining that talent through as they get promoted and go through? So that's where we need to do a better job. Because you know what? They can work till 65, 70, 75, 90. I mean, we're all knowledge units with a lifelong path and the ability to contribute.
That's a great answer. So I have two more questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to save those for the very end, and I was just handed some of our questions from the audience, and so let's look at some of those. So, and thank you for, it appears like you have all written very legibly. Disney was a career choice that could have been relatively short term, but resulted in tremendous long-term success. What advice do you have for soon-to-be graduates making career decisions that have longevity?
That's a great question.
That is a great question.
Great question. Bravo. I think that environment has changed too. I think in the 1950s, you joined a company for 50 years, you got your gold watch. That was that. I was a bit unusual. I remember in my business school class with my joke of I'm a career monogamist, because folks who graduated from MBA in 1994. Maybe they worked 10 years somewhere and then 10 years somewhere else and maybe a couple of changes. What I saw in my last 10 years of my career in this sort of tech-oriented environment, boy, there was a lot of movement and happening. I think my counsel to folks entering the workforce would be a bit patient. I sensed impatience. Impatience, particularly like promotions. Am I getting promoted? Am I getting promoted? And you have to like get the battle scars. You have to do the reps. And I think some patience and some longevity with a team, with a manager, with a company is important. And I think we lost a little bit of that. I think COVID didn't help that. Remote work didn't help that. So that's a little bit of the dinosaur speaking, but I think a little of that is good. But you also need to know when to push the exit button. So are you learning? Are you growing? Are you getting new opportunities? Okay, if not, why not? Is there a different manager, a different group, a different company, a different industry? And then you have to navigate your own career. So I do think there's something to hitting the exit button. It's when I finally hit the exit button and was CFO at Hulu, and I was tortured over that decision. I was asking everyone, the mailman, my husband, my best friends, the person at the grocery store, like, imagine this career choice. I've been at this, I was so torn about taking this new opportunity when I was very comfortably settled in a very interesting job. After I settled into, as I said, I went from Mars to Venus to this, the hoodie in my headspace, I was like, why did I not do this earlier? Because my learning became exponential. Moving companies, moving roles.
Yeah.
So there's probably a happy medium. That being said, the 22 years at Disney with some flexibility, raising a family, who knows, it all worked out. With some hindsight, I think maybe I wish I had challenged myself and made a more dramatic change earlier. But I also think to the folks entering the workforce now, be a little bit patient. Like it does take time to build a career.
Yeah. I saw a lot of heads nodding in the audience when you mentioned battle scars. And right, every one of those battle scars is a lesson learned. So right, take pride in them. You briefly mentioned cybersecurity. Can you expand on how it played a role in your position as CFO?
Well, CFO in some regard, now there's actually real positions with this title, but is chief risk officer too, right? Like your financials have to be right, your accounting has to be right, and you better look out for all the risks. And God forbid there's cybersecurity. God forbid your target and your customer data is stolen. God forbid you get hacked and stuff goes down. Like, what if they go into your system and stuff goes down? Now, that is so technical now that companies need to have cybersecurity experts. And I'm certainly no cybersecurity expert, but as the CFO, if I were at a company where I felt like we didn't have that risk protection and that kind of expertise, you sure as heck, as the C-level team, would want to go hire that, get outside best-in-class advice, and make sure that you're building up because the risk is so great. Customer data or your business going down or your financials going away. There was a really crazy example in media, and I don't know how nationwide this was, but Sony was doing a movie on North Korea, and it was like a comedy, I think with Seth Rogen, spoofing North Korea. Well, they got hacked by North Korea, and they it's a fabulous story. I mean, it's a really interesting story, actually. The CFO of Sony now does leadership lessons, and I can't even imagine navigating through what they had to navigate through. All their financial systems hacked, everything down and hacked, and including the top executives' emails were stolen and then published. And the woman at the head of the studio had made some comments in her emails that were, I can't even remember what exactly they were, but they were not appropriate, and she lost her job as a result. So huge example of beware. So as a chief financial officer, you're also need to be responsible for risk and make sure that your organization has the right resources and protections in place to protect against. And now cybersecurity is just critical in that.
I'm going to ask one more audience question. How do you see AI tech changing the role of the CFO and finance function?
I think it goes back to having some different skill set on your own team that is very savvy with respect to AI, technology really, and then having a really close partnership with the other C-suite executives that are in charge of that, and again, as CFO, making sure that that you've got your finger on, are we appropriately risk managed?
Yeah, okay, that's a great answer. So we've got just 4 minutes. So one of the things that I always like to send us out of the room with is so that all of us can leave here with like some takeaways that we can like do something with when we go back to our offices today. So what are your top 3 takeaways that you want the audience to leave with?
Okay, 1, lifelong learning and curiosity. Number 1, lifelong learning and curiosity. 2, I didn't really say this, but it's my personal mantra, so I'll just say it. Seize the day, carpe diem, right? Like that's, I think, the right approach to life. And including resilience, like we talked about battle scars. Like there's some highs and there are some challenges, and you have to have resilience. And then 3, why not? Let's give a shout out for supporting women in business and in finance, and supporting getting to a place where we have more female CFOs and more female board members and more female senior executives.
I think if she didn't just tell you that her motto was Carpe Diem, y'all probably could have figured that out anyway. It is so clear in the way you have approached your career and your family and everything else. So one final question, what's next?
What's next? Well, this is kind of exciting, but I can't say the official thing yet. But what's next for me is I've really been thoughtful post Lyft, like what's the next chapter? And it's hard. It's hard making that, figuring that out after. For 30 years, I did not have one day where I was not working. I've had 4 jobs, and I went from job with title X, pay X, and responsibility Y to the next job, the next business day. So it was when I left Lyft, on the Friday that I left Lyft, knowing that Monday was going to be open, I was like, what do I do when I wake up on Monday? But I used the time to really be thoughtful. And I think where I am is at the next chapter of, okay, I want to use my time in a slightly different way. I need something to stimulate my mind. I'd like to share my expertise. So I am seeking corporate board positions. And then how's there more of a give back part of my time in my life? Like, whether that's mentoring, not-for-profit, things like that. And then 3, personal, investing in, health, friendships, family, et cetera. On the corporate board side, I've been very actively looking, and I am joining my first public company board right here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it should be announced in mid-February. So I'm very excited about that next chapter.
That is so exciting.
And that's been really interesting, the board search. By the way, there's not been one board conversation where cybersecurity and AI has not come up.
I'm sure.
And she's like a best friend and mentor. She was a very top executive at Salesforce, and then has also now made this move to be on. She's built a board portfolio, and she's my best friend from undergraduate and from MBA. While she's now on 4 boards, and she is getting a master's. She's dinosaur like me. She's getting a master's at NYU, and she has a family in cybersecurity, which is some joint program between engineering and the law school at Columbia. And she's doing this rigorous thing, and apparently it's very difficult as well and very challenging. And she's doing that to add value to her board attractiveness. And her husband said, what's the goal here? And she's like, passing. She's like, because apparently it's quite a challenge, but she's getting this master in cybersecurity.
That is so fantastic, and I think you should not call her or you a dinosaur. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you today.
Well,
thank you so much.
Fun to be here. Yeah. Thank you for coming, everybody. It was very early, so I hope everybody got some good coffee. And it was rainy and cold, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, so please, everybody, join me in thanking Elaine Cole.